We're going up, up, up to the Upper Marae, where stories lift and voices fly. Put your tea towels down, let your worries fade. Open the gates, let the memories cascade. In this podcast world, we give it our best. So grab your cup or come say hi, no jest. We're going up to the Upper Marae, where conversations flow and spirits can't lie.
Kia ora te whānau, ko te ono te maunga, ko whalewhā te awa, ko Takatāpui te waka, ko luwhi mā sāpoe te iwi, ko hamoa te hapu, ko ipinu tuku mātua, ko whātu tuku whaia, ko junior tuku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Malo so for, malangi mama, o lo ingoa o junior. O te sau mai, o lo tina e sau mai ruwhi, mai lo te mai, sau mai sapo e whale a liri. O momo te whātalo whātu ia o tō wa o nia le ne aso. Tato mā futa, I may see a discussion around sexual abuse. So yeah, thank you for this time, but thank you to Dr. Stevens II and I may see a lever that we can have this discussion and also seek what we can do to provide information that others are finding it difficult around the sexual abuse and the sexual violence that's happening in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So, yeah, and that's a little bit about me. Viva!
Hello, my name is Leva. Thank you so much to Dr. Stevens II and Juju for allowing me in this space today to talk about such an important kaupapa, something that is really essential for our Rainbow and Takatāpui individuals to, expand on the topic. I have background and I whakapapa to Whalewhā in Samoa and Vaiusu, and I also come from Rotorua and Kawhia in New Zealand, Aotearoa. I am a colonized individual trying to find his way and his voice, and just based in community with our rainbow individuals. So very blessed to be here, a part of this podcast, and to create conversations. So thank you so much.
Cool. So kia ora koutou katoa, I'm Dr. Alexander Stevens, Te Tuarua, or the second. I hail from Uru Whenua, from Te Upper Marae, all the way up north. My experiences of working with our rainbow community, it goes almost 30 years, I suppose, in the sector. So being with an organisation which originally was called Algae, which then became Rainbow Youth, and then Rainbow Youth, I was cultural advisor for, a decade, I guess. I also did facilitation there as well for our own little group called Pride Out South. Then I also did some other work leading up to being chief executive for Outline, interim role anyway, which was the only Rainbow 0800 number at that point, in addition to supporting our rainbow community. Just things like before you guys were even born, doing things like making sure that our LGBT community was in the Human Rights Act.
So what are some of the unique challenges and members of our rainbow community face within the experience of sexual abuse compared with the wider population?
Let me jump into this one. So when we look at our rainbow community in general, before we start to break down our Māori and Pacific numbers, what we know is that our rainbow communities are 5 times more likely to experience a sexual assault than the New Zealand population. Generally speaking, if you look at most research that's available, which is quite limited in this country, approximately 11% of rainbow adults report sexual assault in the last 12 months, compared to 2% of the population. We also know that our bisexual community has the highest rates of abuse. It's about 50% of our bisexual community has experienced some kind of sexual abuse compared to our other rainbow community for a whole raft of reasons. And our rainbow New Zealanders are twice as likely to experience not only sexual violence but intimate partner violence at the same time.
Yes, that is correct.
So what I'm saying is that there's it features highly, and yet it's very rarely talked about.
I was looking at the stats too, and a lot of it was around the bisexual orientation that was reported experienced sexual abuse, which is 59% higher than any other individual that's identifies as the LGBT community acronym, and which is quite broad around the whole world
Yes.
as well. So
I suspect this is for two reasons. One is that people struggle to come forward anyway if they've been affected by sexual abuse. But if you happen to be from the rainbow community, I feel that there's another stigma on top, which is how people will look at you. And our bisexual community even more so, because I think they get even more judgment, often because of how people perceive the bisexual community. So to me, it's not about saying that one's worse off than the other. It's all bad, but it's complex, which I guess is what's led to this conversation happening. Yeah.
And also like the ones that haven't been reported too. So
That's right.
what does that look like in the community? Yeah.
Which is why I'm hoping that these kind of podcasts will help enable people to find a voice and come forward. Yeah.
In a safe way without so I'm thinking like, how do they do that in a safer way without being a victim of sexual abuse and violence without disclosing it with the perpetrator.
What do you think, Leva? How you work with people with complex needs?
Like you said, it's very complex and there's like layers to it. So it's very specific to the situation of the background of the individual. It would be really hard for me to determine how to support unless I know what religion they come from, what ethnicity they are, their household, if they have both parents. There's so many layers to it, and understanding ways of support mentally before anything else. So it would be very situation based, I believe. So I wouldn't necessarily have a general understanding of support unless we deep dive into the individual themselves.
Do you have any experience to draw from anyone that you've interacted with on this topic?
It's really hard because, as you stated before, me and Juju coming from a Pacific and a Māori lens, it's very common in Pacific Islander families that I've seen, and it's really hard because we come from such a strong religious base of faith. So a lot of the times, like you said, we're really struggling with being accepted with who we are, and then coming forward and fighting against religion is really hard because sometimes it's like being weaponized against us. So we don't want to speak about it, or my clients or my family don't want to speak about it because that's already going against a church force and a community force. So a lot of the times it's very, very, very difficult to even bring up the conversation, and it's taboo. So how do we even help with support when the conversation hasn't even begun?
Right. That's so true. And when Leva says that, like, even if we discuss that with our family, especially if you discuss it with your parents, like, what you mean? Like, they will just brush it off like, just go and have a feed or do something like that. Like, some of that's, a lot of that is navigated with sarcasm. And when we have discussions about that, they'll just brush it off. But I don't think also our parents don't have the tools to navigate that space, to have a discussion with our youth or with their kids or whoever that's dealing with the situation, don't know how to navigate that space or have a proper discussion.
Do you mean just about being from the rainbow community?
Yeah, rainbow community.
Okay, so then you're saying it's complex. I mean, I know this is your interview, not mine, but you're saying before we even get to that topic around it, you've actually got to do other things beforehand.
Yeah. But also dealing with mental health at the same time, like going through this traumatic event can cause a lot of mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and how do you discuss that with others or in a safe space in terms of ahurutanga so that people can discuss the sexual violence and the physical abuse.
And do you think, like, for example, in the islands, sometimes it's normalized, so people don't understand the education behind it and the term behind it? So sometimes you only can help with what you know. So, like, if our people aren't taught that this is wrong or this isn't out of the norm, then they're just going to continue the same behavior?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think sometimes they don't know how to well, they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll just take it on the chin and just, move with what's happening. Yeah.
What about so some guys that I've worked with in the past, there's a sense that it's almost kind of normal, with cousins hooking, or abusing their younger cousins. Thoughts?
Yep. And that's quite true. Like a lot of them could be your own family members and even members of the community, like in the church in itself. And you would think that, that's a safe haven. And some of it's in hidden doors where there's discussions of pastors or bishops and stuff that they have been doing this to our community. Yeah.
And it's all about in terms of my family, it's about pride and it's about appearance and status. So when someone is, say, abused by someone of high status, they don't want to come forward because of how that will reflect the family and the family line and the family name. So again, like we said before, you're going up against forces where you're already going to be set up to fail.
Yeah.
So a lot of people just fight in isolation.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true.
So then given that, well, this was a fun way to start the afternoon. But I'm thinking, so given the complexity, say, within the Pacific space, and we haven't even fully tackled our Māori space, what is a way forward?
I would say having those courageous conversations with friends and family that you do trust, so that you, and as you always say in classes, it takes that one individual, which is your support person, to have that discussion so that you are not carrying the load or the weight of your trauma or the abuse that you've experienced, so that you can discuss it with others. And it's almost like peer support. Yeah. So that's what I would say to navigate this space, is having a trusted individual, or that it just takes that one individual that you trust to have that conversation, and then probably see where that leads for support. Yeah.
I know from a research perspective, one of the challenges for our Takatāpui and Pacific Rainbow communities is that our stories often sit in gaps between data sets. So we tend to look at general population groups like Māori and Pacific rather than do a deep dive under. So we might be visibly seen in the community in ethnicity, but we're often invisible in our statistics when it comes to gender and orientation. So when I worked at the Ministry of Social Development pre-COVID, I was given something like $60,000 to try to understand the needs of our rainbow and our disability community across the whole country. Now, $60,000 is nothing.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things. And then when you divide it between two different population groups, it's like $30,000 each to try to understand the wants and needs. But that's kind of where people were thinking, it could be a priority. The results showed that it was. And then that was about it.
Yeah.
COVID came and said, kia ora.
Kia ora, stay in your
the
bubble.
priorities changed. So, and really, 6 years later, that stuff hasn't changed. So, there are needs, there are reports, so those reports do exist at a government level. It's just about a brave government coming forward and doing something, about it.
Yeah.
What about you, my friend?
Strategies of moving forward at times can be very complex and difficult. Myself personally dealing with this topic, I feel like like I said before, you fight the forces of every community group that you belong to. Myself, I had to come to a whole different country to discover who I am and to discover safety within this topic. So something that I would emphasize is definitely finding your groups and your chosen family, because a lot of the time the perpetrator is within those close vicinities and groups to you. So reaching out to people. Nowadays, I see a lot of support groups popping up, with Nevertheless doing Mani Oro, Burnett Foundation doing sexual health support, with Rainbow Youth now still facilitating those safe groups and being able to stand in those spaces too.
I'm glad you can. My day of being young is over and done with. Also, they have too much energy for me. So God bless them. But yeah, I'm done with them.
Yeah, but I guess being represented and meeting people that have the same stories, also broadcasting of television shows that vocalize these social issues. There's so many out there now that broadcast, and that you may not be able to speak about it, but you watch and you see an outcome and you see a light at the end of the tunnel for others to have solutions to support and to create difference for themselves. So a lot of the times it's just exposure and connection and networking so that we can understand what we're dealing with and solutions when we don't even know what that is.
Which goes to what I often say, irrespective of communities, about being seen, heard, and valued. And what I said to Sione, aka DJ Horsey, from because the other podcast, is God help you if you happen to be Rainbow, Māori, Pacific, and have a disability, because statistically, your chances of being affected by violence and or sexual harm goes up significantly to something over 75% chance of having some kind of abuse aimed at you. So I'm just mindful that, it's such a diverse cut, and there's, as you say, there's no straight way forward. And there's lots of challenges. I'm just kind of reflecting on what we've discussed so far. This is only podcast 1. So, I'm just thinking there's a lot of stuff to navigate.
Yeah. I mean, rainbow survivors often face layers of stigma that others may not experience. So some worry about the disclosing about abuse that led with discrimination because of their sexuality, gender identity. Others may fear being outed before they're ready to be their authentic self, and identifying question rather than experiencing belief. Unfortunately, some of these have been previously experienced rejection from family, faith communities, and health services, and it makes it really hard to trust people enough to ask for help. And these additional barriers can lead to survivors feeling isolated and unsure where to turn.
And I think that's probably another layer that adds them at risk. Yeah. If you've been judged and kicked out by your family, then that's a risk. If you haven't, I hate the word come out. What does that even mean? But you know what I mean?
Coming.
I've never had a musical theme. How wonderful. But some of this Pākehā language I don't think kind of is helpful. Yep. But anyway, and then then you have to somehow announce to your family that you're not going to fit what they consider the norm. All these things kind of set you up in vulnerable spaces that you've got predators that can and will take advantage, of you.
Yeah.
Can I also just throw it out there, since we're putting ourselves at risk, that recently we've seen another senior police officer at a very high level come forward with having children pornography on his laptop and phone. And when I read the article, it's like, I don't know how it got on there. I was like, your job as a police officer is to investigate and find out. And I just didn't believe it. And so what that does, though, is that it ripples out to our community and says, even those that you think are being encouraged to go to it. Now, I'm not saying that every police officer is this, but there have been significant people at high high status that have been caught out, for another word, and are now being held to account, and so it does create an impression of this. What did you call it? Did you call it multiple forces? 4 forces? I was listening to you thinking, this is going to be the podcast title. You've got all these different things that are hitting at you, reminding you if you come forward, there may be consequences both seen and unseen.